Ladies and gentlemen, it is now 6:00 p.m. and a quorum of members is present. So the meeting of the Board of Education of the School District of New Berlin is called to order. Please call the roll.
Ms. Crosby?
Here.
Mr. Helmer?
Here.
Ms. Connick?
Here.
Ms. Schultz?
Here.
Mr. Seidel?
Here.
Ms. Spindler?
Here.
And Mr. Zelinski?
Here.
I would entertain a motion to recess to closed session.
I move to adjourn into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, 1C, E, and F of the Wisconsin statutes to consider A, the approval of closed session minutes of October 14th, B, the employment, performance, and compensation matters pertaining to staff, C, discuss the superintendent goals from 2024, and D, discuss the superintendent goals for 2024 to 2025.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Crosby and a second by Mr. Zelinski. Please call the roll.
Ms. Crosby?
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski?
Yes.
Mr. Helmer?
Yes.
Ms. Connick?
Yes.
Ms. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Ms. Spindler?
Yes.
We're moving into closed session and we'll return to open session around 7:00. It is now 7:09 PM, and we are returning from closed session into open session. In recognition of the serious and important nature of our efforts here, we will join in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. For all those who are able, please rise. And now for those who wish to prepare for the meeting, we will have a moment of silence. This is a public meeting of the Board of Education. Prior to this meeting, notice was given to the public last Friday by providing the agenda to the city library. The agenda was also posted on the district website. A copy of the agenda was forwarded to the Journal Sentinel, the Waukesha Freeman, and the Waukesha Now, all of which have filed requests for all public notices. We have privilege of the floor next. Do we have any this evening?
None.
None? Okay. And then there's the president's message and announcements. I was going to use this time to do a brief personnel committee update. Our chair, Renee, was not able to be there, so I'll let you know what happened. So we met prior to last meeting on October 14th, and per our board goals that we set for 24-25, we were looking to increase job satisfaction. And doing this, we are focusing on increasing the scores of two of the lowest scoring questions on the annual staff survey. And after evaluating the staff survey results, along with the administration, we decided to focus on the work-life balance score for that question and the other question that related to the employee appreciation recognition. So those are the things that we're going to be focusing on, trying to increase those two questions on the employee staff annual survey. If you have any questions or any comments on that, you can direct that then to the Personnel Committee or Chair, Ms. Koenig. So next we have the administrative team report.
I'm going to defer my updates to the regular agenda where we will be providing a presentation on our FastBridge data and then as well as asking the board to approve and adopt the budget and the levy. Thank you. And at this time, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Fuzzy Zeller's great nephew. Oliver is here. He is the new junior New Berlin West School Board representative. He came highly regarded and recommended by the staff and administration at New Berlin West. Oliver obviously has some big shoes to fill with Catalina now gone, and but he is now here, willing to step in, and he has some updates for you. Oliver.
Sorry about that. Hi, my name is Oliver Zeller, and I'm a junior at New Berlin West High School. I currently play baseball, and I participate in DECA, National Honor Society, and Best Buddies. I want to thank the board for allowing me this amazing opportunity to represent New Berlin West at board meetings. The school year has started great and has begun to demonstrate what New Berlin West and its students have to offer. The post-secondary night was hosted at West and had representatives from colleges like UW-Madison and La Crosse. This gave students helpful tips for college applications, essays, and scholarship opportunities. This not only gave our students a competitive edge when applying for college, but also helped students prepare for their future. New Berlin West also hosted the WEF College Fair for its juniors, which allowed students from West, Ike, and other nearby schools to visit over 100 different colleges and military branches. This is a great opportunity for our students. The PSAT and ACT have been offered to all high school levels at a reduced cost, which allows students to take both tests at around half the original price. New Berlin West recently celebrated homecoming with a week filled with fun activities and dress-up days. Fun activities like the food truck day and pep rally helped build up to the homecoming football game on Friday night, where a Flight for Life helicopter landed on the field and delivered the game ball. This all led to the homecoming dance, which was themed around Tangled and had a great turnout. New Berlin West clubs have also been very active lately. DECA and National Honor Society have partnered with the annual Trick or Can drive to collect canned food and donate it to local food pantries. Over 150 bags worth of non-perishable foods were donated. National Honor Society also hosted and promoted a blood drive to the middle school gym, which ended up having over 100 blood donors in one day. The Educators Rising Club went on an educational field trip to help future educators understand their roles in the field of education. And Best Buddies is celebrating the start of fall with a trip to the pumpkin patch and an ice cream social during Flex. As the fall sports season comes to an end, many teams and athletes deserve recognition for their hard work and dedication. Girls volleyball work hard in the post and regular season and have made it to the regional finals against CMH. Boys soccer has made it to the first rounds of playoffs against St. Thomas More. And girls tennis has had an extremely good season, sending 3 of its athletes to the state tournament in Madison. It sent Caroline Gorzak and April Vogel to state for doubles, and Caroline Gervak, who placed 5th overall in singles. Finally, after a great season, NBW football has clinched the 1 seed for playoffs and won 42-0 against Pius. They are now scheduled to play 5th seed Greendale this upcoming Friday in hopes of advancing to the semifinals. Go Vikings.
Thank you, Oliver, and welcome. Appreciate it.
Now we have the district reports, which includes the incident report, enrollment report, suspension report, and donations report. Mr. Seidel, would you please read the donations report?
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. The first donation, 1029, for Eisenhower, for Sazer's Catering, support the 2025 Spanish trip at Ike in the amount of $1,000. The next one is from 1029 for Eisenhower, the Ike Basketball Boosters Club, support the boys basketball by purchasing the annual Huddle software in the amount of $2,700. Another one for Eisenhower from Berghardt Sporting Goods to support an athletics gym sponsorship at Ike in the amount of $3,500. Next one is also for Eisenhower, New Berlin Eisenhower Football Booster Club Incorporated, support football by purchasing the annual Huddle software in the amount of $5,300. Next one is for Ronald Reagan Home and School, reimburse the student council for recess balls and carts in the amount of $451.90. The next one is also for Ronald Reagan Home and School, pay for the buses for a 3rd grade field trip in the amount of $500. The next one is for Eisenhower, New Berlin Eisenhower Cross Country Booster Club to purchase Ike Cross Country senior banners in the amount of $352.17. Lastly, for the district office tech department, WEM Automation, support the technology department by donating 14 24-inch monitors, an in-kind donation of $1,400, bringing our total donations to $15,204. Thank you so much for our generous donors, and that ends my report.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our donors. We next have the consent agenda, which includes notice, the approval of the minutes of the board meeting of October 14th, and the financial reports. Are there any items that should be pulled out for separate consideration? Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Is that, okay. I have a motion by Mr. Seidel and a second by Ms. Connick to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? And hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes. On to the regular agenda, we have our teaching and learning presentation, number 1 for the fall screener.
We'll just give it a minute while he's getting it queued up. But good evening, I'm Amanda Mazurkowitz. I'm the Director of Student Services for our school district. And tonight I also have Kelly Kwiatkowski, our Director of Secondary Schools, and Matt Stepneski, our Director of Elementary Schools. And together we're going to talk about our fall FastBridge data. But I'll just give it just a moment while we're getting signed in here. And I apologize for my voice. So I have my tea here from my medicine ball, just in case. What? Yeah. All right, we're ready to rock and roll. I'm going to start by just grounding us in this first slide. And what this slide really shows us is a reminder that our ultimate goal as a school district is to graduate students college and career ready. And we have to use a multitude of data in order for us to look at how we're going to inform our instruction. Some of the data we look at are measures of accountability, and some of them are overall achievement. So for example, our state assessment, Forward, and we're going to talk to you about Forward in a couple of weeks when we're back here again in front of the board. That ultimately is a measure of overall achievement as a school district, but that feeds into our school report card as one of the measures that the state uses for overall accountability for ourselves as a school district. Then we look at things like FastBridge, and FastBridge is a universal screener, and the point of a universal screener is to just inform our instruction. What it lets us know is which of our students are meeting our grade level expectations, which students are going to need some additional enrichment or extension because they're exceeding our expectations, and which students are falling below benchmark that are in need of additional intervention or support. Other things that we use to inform our instruction are our grades, common assessments that we have in every subject area, as well as progress monitoring data that we use to look at students who are having individual goals measured and progress monitored in FastBridge. So just another note on universal screeners in general. So for those of you who may not know, a universal screener is something that's done outside of the general curriculum, and generally it's done up to 3 times per year. And again, the point of that is really to look at strengths for students and then also opportunities for growth. Another reason that we use a universal screener is because we're trying to see the number of students who are meeting grade level expectations. A universal screener can be used to help a district or a school understand if their daily core instruction is meeting the needs of learners, because a solid curriculum, a solid resource is going to help us, and our instruction that we're using alongside that resource is going to help us reach at least 80% of students. Before Matt and Kelly dig into our data at the elementary and secondary levels with respect to how all of our students are achieving, and then also looking at some targeted subgroups, I'm just going to walk you through where we are as a district with those targeted subgroups with respect to our overall demographics, and then also highlight where we are in comparison to other school districts with those same subgroups. And why that's important is because that can impact achievement, and so just trying to give everybody a picture of who we are as a school district. The slide that in front of you here is starting in 2021, going all the way up through our 3rd Friday count, which would be the 3rd Friday in September. And it gives you a picture of our overall demographics. And what's highlighted in blue on the bottom are the 3 subgroups that we look at particularly closely for achievement, and that's our students who are considered economically disadvantaged, and we use free and reduced lunch populations to be able to look at that number. Limited English proficiency refers to our students who we would classify as English learners, who English is not their first language, and then students who are in special education or students who have IEPs. One of the things that I wanted to note is that one of our fastest growing subgroups are students who have limited English proficiency. And a piece of data that I was just talking to our team about earlier today is that even though in September we had 141 students who are considered English learners, today we have 156. So we've had an increase of 15 students in just a month and a half, and that does have an instructional impact in our classrooms, because even though our number is increasing, the needs of those students that we're getting aren't the same year over year either. This slide shows you all of the other Waukesha County school districts. The reason you don't see 2024, 2025 on this slide is because that data isn't available to the public yet in terms of that data being certified, whereas this slide, we have that data because that's internally in our student information system as well. So you'll see where we're comparing in terms of the percentage of students that are considered economically disadvantaged with our Waukesha County partners around us. This is our percentage of students with disabilities. It's stayed relatively stable over the last few years. And then our percent of English learners. I'm just going to take a second real quick, because I know I'm starting to sound funny. This slide gives you a little bit of a closer look at the breakdown of where those students are coming in terms of elementary or secondary. And this is with respect to students who are in special education who have IEPs. So these are students with disabilities. And we've had approximately a 2% increase, because this is rounded up to the nearest tenth, or the nearest whole number, I'm sorry. But we've had approximately a 2% increase since 2020, 2021. But when you look at the actual number of students, it's 100 students, a little bit more than 100 students district-wide that we've increased from 2020, 2021 until now. And so that does have an instructional impact in our classroom with respect to what those students need and the resources that it takes to meet their needs. This slide is something that you didn't see in the Waukesha County comparisons because it's not data that's available publicly for other school districts. But there is something also called a 504 plan, and students who have a 504 plan also have a disability, but they're not eligible for special education in terms of an IEP, but they do require an accommodation plan, and so their needs in the classroom and their instructional supports are different than students that don't have a 504 plan or who don't have some sort of disability. And so this is another area that has grown for us over the years, as you can see, and it's particularly impacted our secondary population, but as you can see in 2020, 2021, we had 78 students total district-wide who had a 504 plan, and right now we have 146 students. In this slide is some more detailed information about our English learner population. So those students who are identified as English learners are required to have something called an individualized learning plan, or an ILP. And so that provides teachers with accommodations that they're required to provide the student because that student has limited English proficiency at this time. And as I said before, this is one of our quickest growing subgroups that we have right now in our school district, where we have doubled the number of students in the recent years who are coming to us that have limited English proficiency. And again, as I said before, we're at 156 right now, with 103 of those being at elementary and 53 of those being in our secondary buildings. And also, as I said before, I think one of the interesting things, especially when we're talking about students who are English learners or students who have disabilities, even if the number is changing or the number is in flux, so are their needs. And so we're not just talking about necessarily the same type or group of kids that we're getting year over year. Sometimes, in this case, in the last couple of years, we've gotten a lot of newcomers or students who have just recently immigrated to our country versus students who might have been identified as an English learner in another school district but moved here from West Dallas or MPS or another neighboring district. So these would be a lot more students who are new to country. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt Stepneski, and he's going to walk you through our data that we have for elementary. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very fortunate to be the Director of Elementary Schools for the School District of New Berlin. And so when we talk about Fall FastBridge, we talk about the screener, this is really our starting point. So this is how our current students are performing, and then we create goals and action steps for their learning. All right, so then a note about the universal screener. So we have used FastBridge 3 times a year for the past couple years. But now Act 20 mandates that we use AimsWeb Plus as our universal screener starting this winter, so our next testing session, for the early identification of reading skills. And so since this decision was made by DPI later in the summer, we're going to figure out a way to utilize both screeners. And so based on the grade level or the district building goals, we're going to utilize the entire suite of FastBridge for both here. So in the fall, we're using FastBridge. In winter, we're going to utilize AimsWeb for K through 3, and then FastBridge 2nd, 3rd, and then through 9th grade, and then math all the way through. And then in the spring, we're going to utilize both. So we have longitudinal data from FastBridge for the past couple years, and so we want to hold on to that data as long as we can, and then we're going to incorporate AimsWeb, and then for next year, we'll make some decisions in the spring as to what we want to utilize. All right, so we're going to start with A reading. So this first slide measures all students at or above the 40th percentile in 3rd grade A reading, which is measuring general reading skills. So the 40th percentile is what FastBridge would consider to be proficient. And so our achievement in this assessment has been consistent over the past 4 years. As Amanda mentioned earlier, the universal screener lets you know if your core instruction is meeting the needs of 80% of your kids. In this case, it almost is, and so we're always striving to go above that mark. But this is where we are with A reading. In the past, we've been able to correlate students' achievement on A reading above the 55th percentile as an indicator that they would do really well, and they would be proficient on the Ford exam. With the Ford exam having new cut scores this past spring, we can't make that correlation anymore, but we're able to do it at least one more time with this fall screener. And so this is the percent of 3rd graders at or above the 55th percentile over the last 4 years in FastBridge. Still A reading, above the 40th percentile, so above that benchmark. And this is cohort students who were in 3rd grade last year, and they're in 4th grade in the fall now. It's not ever really a full true cohort because it's at times it's different kids. From year to year, it's always different kids, but it's the majority of students from one year to the next, and so we're tracking that data. And this would be third graders in the fall of last year who are now fourth graders this year, above the 55th percentile for A reading. All right, so we talked about pulling out subgroup data. And so this is third grade A reading, students in these particular subgroups above the 40th percentile. So one way to look at this graph is to look at just one subgroup first. And so, for example, the percent of students with disabilities, their proficiency has grown or went from 20% of the kids above the 40th to 48 to 40 and to 41. So you could look at their growth over time as a separate subgroup, but then you can compare that growth to students without disabilities. And then you can kind of see where, in general, where the gap has closed. So the gap in 2021 was 20 to 81%, and then it was 48 to 81, and then 40 to 84, and then 41 to 82. And so you can look at each demographic group and see the growth of that group, and then you can also compare it to how wide the gap is or if we are able to close it. One thing to consider when looking at subgroup data is that the needs of one particular student with a disability or one English learner can be drastically different than the needs of another one in this same group. And Amanda alluded to that earlier. Also to note that some students may be part of multiple subgroups. So for example, a student who has a disability may also be economically disadvantaged. And so this graph is mutually exclusive to that, but some kids fall into multiple subgroups.
Can I ask one question about that?
Yeah, you bet.
So, that last slide, if you look at all the total group, that would have been then slide number 14, is that right? Am I tracking right then?
Let me go back here. So this is all kids.
Right, so,
Okay.
and that's the same data then for that last slide, but it's just the combined group? Am I tracking right? Okay.
So this,
The next one shows 55th.
next
Okay.
one will be 55th, yes.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Reading this, students with disabilities generally have a larger gap than students with economic disadvantage or English language, right? That's
Correct, yes, you are reading that correctly, yes. The gap, and actually we talk about that in another slide, because we're gonna show this type of slide after every assessment. The gap is wider for students with disabilities than it is for English learners or economic disadvantage. We're seeing that as a trend with all of our tests, with all of our assessments. Yep, that is correct. Yep. And then this, okay, ooh, go ahead.
Before we move on, I just want to
Yeah.
make sure, are you okay with taking questions in the middle of this?
I have to be now, right? Like we,
Okay, I didn't know.
We've already
I
opened
didn't
that
know
up.
if you wanted to, there was a certain part where you pause and take questions. I
Yeah, we
didn't
would
wanna
prefer to
move.
just continue on and just save questions to the end, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking, it's fine. I'm new here, so whatever you do tonight is what I'm gonna think.
I know these guys. They
Whatever
will
you
bombard
whatever
with
you do
questions.
tonight is the way it's always gonna be, right? All right, so third grade CBM. So this assessment, this universal screener, measures fluency and accuracy. So students are reading a 1-minute passage at their grade level at that time of the year. Area of growth for us, and so this is one, and when we get to kind of the summary of these slides, this is an area of growth. And so we want, if needed, we want the entire class to be practicing fluency. We want targeted small groups, either during their intervention time or independent read time, to be practicing fluency. Only second and third graders take this assessment as part of the screener. But if we have kids that we are concerned about, whether in formal interventions or whether bordering maybe needing formal interventions, we will progress monitor all kids first through sixth grade with CBM reading, if they're ones that we are concerned about, to track their progress. So then here's that subgroup slide again, but with CBM reading above the 40th percentile. Shifting over to math, so this is A Math, which measures general math skills, math ability. All students at or above the 40th percentile, and this is actually a slide of high achievement, an area of strength for us. At least 85% of the kids have been proficient in their general math skills over the last 3 years. And this is, This is all third graders above the 55th. Again, trying to make that correlation of if you perform above the 55th on FastBridge, you should be proficient on the Ford exam. And then here's the cohort third graders from last fall to, they're now fourth graders this fall for A math, above the 40th. And then above the 55th, that same group of kids, the majority of those kids that are cohort. But that correlation of forward is no longer applicable after this year with the new cut scores, but we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. So now third grade A math by subgroup. And so as to Mitch, alluded to earlier, the achievement gap between subgroup and non-group students is also less in math than it is in literacy. So that gap isn't as wide for math as it is for literacy, as you can notice here. Auto math is essentially fact fluency. And so all the third grade students at or above the 40th percentile. Another slide of high achievement in math. And this is it. This is all students above the 55th. And then auto math by subgroup. And so to summarize, the areas of strength, as you saw, the A math and auto math, the percentage of students meeting proficiency at or above 85 in the last 3 years, that's a celebration. In general, as we just talked about, the subgroups are seeing growth and those gaps are decreasing. We could speak a little bit to, we've hired a couple more EL coaches and more EL student learning assistants to work with some of our students that are with that growing EL population. One school example is Elmwood is trying to analyze their EL English learner data for A reading over the span of 2 years. And so, as Amanda said, some of these kids that are new to country, looking at their growth over 2 years, and you can see that the percentage of kids at Elmwood, in this case, 13% were above the 40th percentile 2 years ago, and that same group of kids, well, for the most part, 39% of them. So some nice growth there at Elmwood is just one example. And we are seeing some similar data with English learners on the Ford exam, and we'll talk about that soon. Area of growth, as we pointed out, that's CBM reading. We want kids to be able to read on grade level fluently at that time of year. And if they're not, the whole group is getting passages to read as like a warm-up to their daily practice. Small groups for sure. And then, like I said, any students that we are concerned about are going to be progress monitored using a CBM probe weekly. 1-minute probe every week, and then we track that progress. So points of emphasis for us, we're looking at we've always done this, consistent data analysis of multiple assessments. So it's not just FastBridge, we're also looking at grades, we're looking at progress monitoring probes if necessary, but building leadership teams, so the principals and the school psychologists and the coaches at each building, they're looking at that data every week, one of the action steps we put into place this year. And then staff are looking at similar data every month as one of their staff meetings is for data analysis once a month. For years, we've done every 6 weeks, the building leadership team meets with every grade level. That's been going on for a couple years now. But now we've added in the special education student support team meeting, where the building leadership team sits down with all the case managers and the special education coach, and they look at the progress monitoring and the grades and the goals of just students in special education and what are their disability-related needs in reading. So that's another action step that's new for this year. We always have quarterly progress reports that are in IEPs, students that have disabilities. But now with Act 20, there's a personal reading plan for every student, K3, who's performing at or below the 25th percentile. And so that's something that our coaches and our psychologists have worked really hard on to make sure that all the kids that were essentially flagged or at or below the 25th percentile in the fall, some of the data that you saw, that they are getting these personal reading plans. And then, as we said, the universal screeners 3 times a year. We will continue with that. We'll just do a mix of FastBridge and AIMSweb as we go throughout the year. And of course, we look at our data annually with the Forward exam. And then all these action steps are new for this year. We want to have Tier 1 small group instruction instructional opportunities within the ELA block. And so there's, of course, targeted groups that happen during intervention time. That's happened for years. But where can we support these students in the actual instructional block? So there's another staff meeting per month dedicated to that. There's a weekly co-planning meeting, so that's special education with general education teachers. There's that meeting that's set up weekly at the building so that our coaches can support all the grade level teams at each school. And so with that, if I'm a student who's performing at or below 25th percentile, I should be getting tier 1 small group support during my ELA block. I should be getting some kind of small group targeted instruction during intervention time, and then I should be getting some kind of small group reteaching or help support during independent read time. That's an action step for our teachers for this year. And then for those that don't know, we are in a math curriculum review year with potential piloting of new programs for next year. And so we have a staff survey that's gone out. We're providing professional learning around math. And then we are piloting new math interventions for this year, along with researching maybe what's the best direction to go as far as all things math. Thank you.
Thanks for having me this evening. We will examine the secondary FastBridge data. So A reading is more similar to the assessment questions that you would get on a forward test or an ACT test. However, it's a lower level type question. If you remember about FastBridge, it's an adaptive test, so it's not a criterion reference. So students, depending how they do, can get a harder question or a lower question until it can gauge how the student is performing. So we've been consistent with our A reading at 74%, and we're going to see when we get to the subgroup scores which groups we really need to focus on. Here's our cohort data. So these are the same students in 7th grade last fall and how they performed this year in 8th grade in fall. This is our subgroup, and you're going to see at or above 40th percentile and not 55th percentile like you saw at elementary school, because we didn't have that research study they based the 55th percentile on for forward, so we've always just presented the 40th percentile. And you can see the subgroups that we really need to focus on for our A reading assessment, and that's like comprehension, would be our students with disabilities and students who are EL. We have seen some growth for our economically disadvantaged students. Auto reading is foundational reading skills. We've seen some success with that. That's our incoming 7th grade students for fall. And this is our cohort data, so the same students 7th grade to 8th grade. These are the subgroup for auto reading, again, foundational literacy skills. It's important to note that a big reason why these scores are a little bit higher than the A reading, if a student is in intervention, they're getting small group instruction or one-on-one support, they're working on their foundational literacy skills, sounds, reading basic words, and that's why this is a little bit higher for them than the A reading. Math. Percentage of 7th grade students at or above benchmark for FastBridge for math. The A math assessment types, again, are similar to the forward, the pre-K ACT or ACT. However, it taps out around geometry, so you're not going to see questions like you would in the ACT around pre-calc or trig. And a high level of success there. When looking at cohort, so the same exact students, 7th grade fall to 8th grade fall, we're seeing high growth but stagnant. And this is how our subgroup population performs for mathematics. We have been trying some new interventions, which we believe are reflected in the scores here. This would be automaticity, so when you think of fast, math facts. And I skimmed over it, but we're at 87%. And then cohort. So fall 7th grade to fall 8th grade this year, similar to past years, we've saw an increase in our data. And here's subgroups. I want to point out our EL students because I think that's an area of success. We still have some work to do with our students with disabilities. So highlights, areas of strengths. Our 7th grade students are coming in at the same levels as previous years, or they've grew a little bit, except in the area of auto reading. Our subgroup achievement are increasing and the gaps are decreasing. An area of growth is A, reading. Specifically, we need to improve on our subgroup population of our EL students and students with disabilities. And overall, only 74% of our 7th grade students are at benchmark for that A reading assessment. So it is something that we need to continue to focus on. We are doing, similar to elementary, weekly building leadership team meetings. So last year, they did have building leadership team meetings with just the admin group. This year, we're adding in our coaching, and for half of the meetings, they need to look at a piece of data and analyze it and then determine how they're going to use it. Included into that meeting is subgroup conversations. So they're not looking at data as a whole, they're taking a look at our subgroups and how our subgroups are doing over time. We also have professional development on literacy at least once a year across our secondary buildings for all teachers. And then we're continuing with our English and math support class sections. So that's one-on-one help or small group help for students who have large deficits, who are performing below the 25th percentile on an assessment. We're adding more math diagnostic assessment screeners to know exactly which intervention is needed. And we have more assessments at our fingertips that we have purchased to be able to use to help students grow at the secondary level. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
I just had one. This is a different presentation than what we've received before with the subgroups on it. Is that something that we're gonna see going forward?
Yeah, so what we did last year, if you look at that presentation calendar that we shared a few months ago, based on some feedback that you had shared with us, Ron, we were doing a lot of presentations, but rather we consolidated that data into this presentation and the next one, as opposed to an isolated presentation. So that's why so yes, it is different, but what we did was we consolidated the data and the info.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
On slide 35, it was a 0% proficient for students with disabilities.
Yes, that's correct.
Is that like a small subsample? Like that was, 'cause I think usually
Yeah.
you don't provide data.
Sorry,
Your eyes.
scared me.
Usually you guys don't provide data if it's a population of less than 5, I think is what the rule is or something like that. So that's a larger sample size of more than 5 people.
No, not necessarily on this. So when yes, we don't, but you're actually right. We haven't provided that before, but we pulled it all together for this. And in that example, I'd have to look back at my actual spreadsheet, the number, and we can get that to you of how many students that was out of. But in all of these cases, you're looking at less than 2 handfuls of students at a particular grade level who have a disability. But then combining both schools together, so we would have been more than 5.
I would say you're probably at 10 or 15 or something.
Ish,
Okay.
but we can give you the exact data from our spreadsheet. You can have the spreadsheet. But yes, that would have been 0%, unfortunately, of students that would have been proficient that year, which is not okay with us.
No, me neither. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, team.
Do that.
Yes, please.
All right, so then the second item is a second read of policy revisions from the semi-annual catch-up of Neola Update 33-2. Do I have a motion to approve them as presented?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Seidel and a second by Mr. Helmer to approve the policy revisions from the semi-annual catch-up of Neola Update 33-2. Is there any discussion? Then hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes. And we have a couple more motions here. We have discuss approve the original budget for the school year ending June 30th, 2025. Do you have new information to present? Or do we just go ahead and do that?
I would like to get into the presentation. So If we could start at the top, please. I know I need it in presentation mode. All right, so we at the annual meeting had proposed a total tax levy of $44,310,163. As the board is aware, we refine these numbers as we get closer to the end of October. These numbers were solidified last week. So today we're actually asking for a total levy amount of $43,596,900 with us approximately $700,000 levy change, which will actually bring down the mill rate that we had proposed at the annual meeting. And essentially what this means is, I believe I had shared with the board in my last update, it was a $7 increase. It actually ends up being a $9 increase on a $350,000 property. These are the reasons why. At the end of the day, we receive more state aid. More state aid does not mean more money to the district. It just means that the impact from our local property taxpayers' share comes down. And so that's why you're seeing that change, a small increase in general fund expenses. Other funds have no significant budget adjustments. And then just again, we did solidify that the property value increase of 1.95% was the lowest since 2013. So for the first time in a long time, we're going to see a slight increase in the rate per thousand equalized value. Very minimal, but nowhere near where it was back in 2014, 2015. So we should again continue to be proud that we as a school district continue to keep the tax levy side of things in a very respectful manner on behalf of our taxpayers. So this is the breakdown. And what we are looking for is, again, $43,596,900 total tax levied upon all property, real and personal, within the bounds of the school district of New Berlin. Thank you. Patrick, anything to add?
I will say, if you remember, every time I presented this information to you, I said, I can't promise you that every year our tax levy rate is going to go down. And it happened this year, but 2 cents is, I think that's pretty reasonable for a district like ours.
Do I have a motion then? I believe you have to actually state the exact amount on this one. Oh, wait, let's see.
I believe this is just,
This one we
the
got.
first motion is just to accept the original budget.
Okay. All right, do I have a motion to approve the original budget for the school year ending June 30th, 2025?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Seidel and a second by Mr. Helmer to approve. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes. Now we have to discuss approve the School District of New Berlin property tax levy for the 2024-25 school year. Do I have a motion to approve that in the amount of $43,596,900, including a $1,200,000 for capital expansion projects?
Otherwise known as Fund 41.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Seidel and a second by Mr. Helmer to approve. Any discussion? Then all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes. And then we do have one item from closed session. Do I have a motion for that?
I move to improve employment services report as presented.
I have a motion by Ms. Spindler and a second by Ms. Crosby. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes. We have future meetings and dates. Board meetings are generally held the second and fourth Mondays, beginning at 7:00 p.m. in Conference Room E here in district offices. Unless noted otherwise, we have a meeting November 11th, a meeting November 25th, and December 9th, which is the only meeting in December. Other important dates to remember is that November 4th is the end of the quarter. November 11th is Veterans Day. November 27th, we have a staff in service, there's no school. November 28th through 29th is the Thanksgiving holiday, no school. We are going to return to closed session, and I do need a motion for that, and that would be to discuss superintendent goals for 2024, 2025. Do I have a motion? No, wait, come on.
All right, Madam President, I move to adjourn to closed session pursuant to section 19.85, 1C, E, and F of the Wisconsin statutes to consider the 2024, 2025 superintendent goals.
Second.
So I have a motion by Mr. Seidel and a second by Ms. Connick to return to closed session. Please call the roll.
Mr. Seidel,
Yes.
Ms. Connick,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby, Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Ms. Schultz,
Yes.
Ms. Spindler,
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll be moving into closed session, and we will adjourn from closed session. Thank you.